Okay, this is off the cuff, major off the cuff, but Kristi Winters has released a video yesterday, which I think it's just tragic, tragically wrong. And it chimes in with the video that I made the other day, which is why I want to get this off my chest. A video that I made in my message to feminists. If you didn't see that video, it was a message to feminists, but I suppose it's a message that applies to everybody, which is to try and be aware of self-serving biases, which we have and which can cloud the way in which we view things such as fairness and equality. So it's not that we're not aiming for fairness and equality, but that there are different versions of fairness and equality, and the version that we pick depends upon our perspectives and on our self-serving biases. And if you read the journal article that I linked, it juxtaposed that alongside this other model, which is that the failure to arrive at decisions and agreements is due because of a paucity of information, because one or both sides are not party to all of the information. And if only everybody was party to all the relevant information and data, then it would be so much easier. Then we would be able to arrive, everybody would act like a perfectly rational, intelligent agent, and we'd all be able to arrive at a decision, at a consensus, because we were working on the same information. And it was saying that simply isn't the case. And then with that in mind, I then go and see this video from Kristi Winters. Now it's only 58 seconds. What I'll do is I'll speed it up a little bit, because there's no speaking, there's just some plinky plonky music and a series of slides. So this was Kristi's video. So I watched this video and I just thought this is not just wrong, but it's wrong with a capital W and probably a capital R-O, a bit of a spelling brain fart here, N and G as well. Not because she's asking the question, not because she's asking for evidence, but because of the stupid shit that follows it. Although when she responded to me in comments, she made it out as if I was criticising her for asking for evidence, alongside telling me that I haven't had the requisite training to be able to comment on any of these things. But it was this idea that it should be easy and that everybody should provide the same answers. Presumably the same way that economists all look at the same data and they all arrive at exactly the same fucking conclusions, don't they? No, they don't, do they? And neither would you expect that here, because these things are hideously complicated, right? And not everybody is in the same circumstance. And so you have to account for the fact that people are in different circumstances. And that means you have to make subjective judgments, and whenever you have to make subjective judgments, not everybody is going to arrive at the same things. You know, are people in the countryside, are they equal to people in the town? Well, it's very difficult to decide, isn't it? More people work in agriculture in the countryside, more people work for the council who work in the town. So those are different sets of circumstances. Is it an inequality, or is it just a different set of circumstances? That depends on how you weight those different things. And that thread runs through this whole discussion here. And what it means is that whether or not women have achieved equality, it's very, very difficult to demonstrate absolutely. So this is the thing. I happen to agree with her. I don't think that women have achieved equality in the West, and I think that there probably is still a need for feminism. But even if there wasn't, and even if there had, I'm not convinced that I could demonstrate that to the satisfaction of everybody. And there are reasons for that. The first is that people have different definitions, fundamentally understandings of what equality entails. Of course, you've got basic premises such as the idea of equality of opportunity versus the equality of outcome. But then how do you equate equality to need? And to requirement? People's needs and requirements are greater. So in terms of antenatal and postnatal care and the whole business of pregnancy, for example, that in itself will skew health spending in terms of women. So just to evaluate health spending, what is equality? Is it spending the same on a man as it is on a woman? Or do you have to start making some very considered judgments as to what the requirements are? And how far down that line do we go with regard to things like that? And every system, the problem is is that nobody is suggesting, I don't think, that equality requires men and women to be absolutely the same in every regard. So to be absolutely equally represented in every job and in every sphere, and to have exactly the same interests and everything else. But what we're seeing is there has to be some kind of balance. But how the hell do you evaluate that kind of balance? Because even when you just narrow it down to one social system, it is hideously complex. Even if we just look at the thing about political power, because that was something that I mentioned in a video a bit ago, and I talked about that in terms of political representation, and some other people said, well, for them, the key issue in terms of equality with regard to political power is the vote. The point of voting is the important point to them. For me, the point was the point of political representation. Kristi Winters made a video on the same subject some time ago, and the key point to her seemed to be the number of male lobbyists versus the number of female lobbyists. Of course, you could go even further and say, well, it doesn't matter who's doing the lobbying. What is important is what they're lobbying about, what perspective they're taking. If they're taking a pro-female perspective on lobbying, or lobbying on gendered issues that are more pertinent to women, perhaps to do with abortion and the ability to choose as opposed to rough sleeping, for example, well, then that would be an issue of equality as well. So there's all these different facets. How do we weight political power in one facet versus the other? But even if we now, let's just narrow that scope down again to political representation. It still isn't clear, because let's say we have an example of the United Kingdom. Let's say we had a situation where 50% of members of parliament were male and 50% are female. Right now, for some people, they would say, okay, well, in this particular social system, then, for me, that is equality. But then there will be some people on Kristi Winters' side of the fence who will say, well, no, that isn't equality, because the only way we've managed to contrive that circumstance is through all-female shortlists. And the very fact we've needed all-female shortlists is indicative of fundamental inequalities within our society that have required those shortlists to be put in place. And then there will be people on the other side of the argument who will say, actually, those all-female shortlists in themselves are an inequality, because it means in certain constituency only women for a certain political party are able to stand for that party, and that is discriminatory, and that is the absolute antithesis of equality. So even in a circumstance seemingly as one-dimensional as that, there are three different perspectives that you can very easily pick, and you can make a reasonable argument for all three of them. So now you expand that over 10,000 different spheres, and then accept the fact that you're going to have to gauge an inequality in one sphere versus an inequality, a balancing inequality with the other. How the fuck is that simple? How the fuck is that an easy thing to do? And how the fuck can you have any expectation, however naive you are, that everybody is going to arrive at the same answer? After all, Kristi Winters' perspective is that feminism is still needed and that equality hasn't been achieved, and yet people don't all arrive at that answer, do they? So that proves in itself that it isn't easy, and that everybody do not arrive at the same answer just because we have access to the same data. So I just... The reason that I bring this up isn't to just start slamming Kristi Winters. It's because this fitted so perfectly with what I said in my message to feminists the other day in terms of these self-serving biases and the fact that we need to be aware of them. And it's an unawareness of them that leads to tripe like this fucking video that Kristi Winters has put out. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Very off the cuff this, but thank you for watching anyway. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.